I'm so pleased to have you on Tearing Up the Good Girl Script. I mean, we've known each other for a long time, so this is really great. Let's start with the first question, which is, if you cast your mind back to when you were growing up, what version of the Good Girl Script were you taught? So the Good Girl Script is the one that says you shouldn't be doing that because you're a girl.
I've been reflecting on that, and it is a really interesting question. I think, you know, in some ways I had quite an unusual upbringing, but with my parents, and I came from a very strong lineage of strong women. You know, my mum was strong, so was my grandmother, and so that line, I think, sort of came down to me. And I think if anything negative from that, I think would have been more around being called bossy boots, being strong. Not so much from maybe my mum would have called me bossy boots, but it was always done in a bit of jest. But I didn't actually grow up with, you can't be something because you're a girl. It's never really been part of my script. I've always gone for it, and I've always had great support, particularly from my parents. So it was more around noticing that, that this sort of bossy element was quite strong in the discourse, strength, in leadership. Yeah, that was more of the common thing that I really remember. Well, we weren't allowed a television, so I wasn't brought up with TV. So that's interesting too, because I didn't have those sort of media messages coming in to the home. So all those sort of stereotypes and things weren't really part of my sort of sphere, I suppose. Maybe I just had positive reinforcements. I was a tomboy, and that whole discourse is interesting too, isn't it, about being a tomboy? Because I did like to do more outdoorsy things, and climbing trees and playing with cars and running around and being out on my bike. So I had more of those types of things rather than the sort of maybe the stereotype of the girly type things.
Yeah. So far in your professional career, I mean, we have known each other for many years, and we have witnessed each other's progress and struggles and triumphs. So it really is wonderful to have you on this interview series. When you think about your professional journey so far, what is the biggest challenge that you've overcome?
I think one of my biggest challenges, which has been a pattern through my life, is being too optimistic, too hopeful, which is interesting, isn't it? Because we do see optimism and hope as very, very important. Particularly now, we need lots of hope and optimism. But at the same time, I think that optimism can have a bit of a dark side. It can stop you seeing reality as it is and dealing with reality as it is. It's not to say that you shouldn't reframe or repivot or position yourself in a different way, but I'm starting to really explore, and looking back on my life too, thinking about it now, is, if we can have that sense of buoyancy and optimism and hope for ourselves, for our future, but have it with a clearer thinking, have it with a more of a, I wouldn't say pragmatic, that maybe is the wrong word, but more of a clear thinking about what really exists and what is really going on. And therefrom, from that point, what must I do? What is the right decision to make given the circumstances that I'm in? And I think that has been a real challenge for me, because I default to optimism within a nanosecond. It's so subconscious in my psyche that I think it's even before a nanosecond. So to actually stand back and say, what's really going on here, and what is the best decision to make, I think would have stood me in good stead. Now, I do say that, but obviously on the other side, maybe I wouldn't have made certain decisions that would have got me to where I am now either. Had I taken that pause, had I thought things through in a different way. So one never knows in retrospect, ultimately, how your life may unfold. But it is something that I am working with more now, is that sense of really thinking through what's going on here. What are the different perspectives of reality? As we know, reality can be different things to different people, but what is the truth of what is going on, and what must I do, and how must I react, and what are the things that maybe I can create in response to that, rather than defaulting to that point of, yes, this is fantastic, I can change this into anything. You know what I mean?
It's the difference between it, when you're overly optimistic, you fail to see what is actually going on. That's one side. And on the other side, when you do know what's going on, but you are optimistic enough to be willing to take a risk, right? Because that's the thing. I know that you have taken many risks in your life, in your, you know, since I've known you, and I can see what you mean, that if perhaps it was the optimism that helped you to take those risks. But I do think that the clarity of perception is really, really important. And interestingly, this is something that I notice with a lot of women. So with a lot of the women I coach, because we are so good at having the intuitive vision and seeing the possibility, and we are so good at wanting to uplift and wanting to nourish and wanting to make it better for everybody. And that is a fantastic quality of the feminine. But the challenge is then being practical and having, in a sense, the grittiness to see the challenges, to recognize them for what they are, and then take practical steps. So it's really bringing that vision into practical reality in a way that is driven by clarity, rather than being too soft and open-hearted about it. It's this thing of having too much of an open heart is actually a recipe for disaster, and it does not bring good success.
Or even just like, you know, pushing on through despite obstacles, you know. And I think another thing around that as well is to do with financial education. It's an interesting area. I mean, I have degrees, I have an MBA, but when I think about it, how much was I really taught about money? How much was I really taught about how to make money? How much was I taught about business models? And if we are business women, we need good financial education. And I think that's another area that I wish I had more input, or spent more time thinking about in the past, which I am now thinking more about, you know, in my current life.
In my Tearing Up the Good Girl Script model, which is the methodology that I've created over the many, many years now to work with women leaders, the financial piece is one of the key 4 areas that I work with, because I realize that for women, unless we are fully empowered with regards to money, however much success we get, we're never really going to settle into what we are able to create. Money represents our ability to thrive on the physical plane, right, in this world. So that is fantastic. When you think about all the different things that you have learned, and you think about Tearing Up the Good Girl Script, what are your top 3 tips?
My top tip would be to spend some real time doing some critical thinking about what you believe and why. You know, and to really dive deep into some of your own assumptions and look at, you know, even write them down and say, where did I get this from? You know, where did I get this belief from? And actually, does it serve me now? Is it really what I believe, or even what I want to believe right now about my life? And that, again, takes a bit of rigor. It takes a bit of challenge, self-challenge. And actually letting go a lot of the time of the things that actually aren't serving you. So I would say that's number 1. I think number 2, surround yourselves with people and with ideas and with philosophies that challenge you and that believe in your potential and can see your potential, so that you know, we're always bigger than we are, you know, but sometimes we just sort of settle where we are. And you know, if you're around other people that can see that, they can help pull that out and they can help inspire you. So I think it's really, really important to have a good tribe of people around you. And then I think the third one really is about self-belief and having that sense of your own purpose, about what it is that really drives you, motivates you, what's pulling at your heart. I often talk about that sort of red thread that runs through your life that's core to you and your strengths and your personality, and then have the courage to step into that And that's why self-belief and confidence are so important in enabling us to be who we are and to really turn up in the world and have a greater impact with our lives.
The self-belief, again, this is so gendered. You know, boys are brought up to believe in themselves, and actually I think it was different for you, but for the majority of girls, they are brought up to question themselves. This is something that's come up in several of the interviews I've done so far already, that very early there goes in this, we're told to question ourselves, and it's often to do with the body and, you know, the way, either the way we sit or the way we dress. You're going along quite happily, you think just minding your own business, and someone will come and tell you off for sitting in a particular way or dressing in a particular way. And that questioning of the body then turns into a self-questioning, and it cuts away at the self-belief of girls. So building that back up from, like you said, from within, from your core, from your own personal beliefs and abilities, is foundational for achieving success, not only in the professional sphere of life, actually, also in our personal life as well. Everything you said, I think, will support women, particularly those who really are moving forward in the business world. So thank you very much for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.